But then the question arises, what creates this extraordinary strength? How do we, in a world heavy with roles and expectations, peel away the false layers painted by others? How do we step beyond the polished facade and into the raw truth of who we are meant to be? In today's video, we'll explore how Carl Jung explained this profound transformation, and how each of us can begin the sacred process of awakening. The goddess within, a power that has always been there, waiting to be remembered. Don't look away. We are about to unlock this secret together. But before we begin, I have to ask you something. Are you truly ready to face yourself? Not the version of you the world knows, the one polished, smiling, and performing, but the raw and filtered you that exists in silence. The first and most well-hidden secret is this: self-trust. Do you really trust yourself? Not when you're dressed to impress, not when you're admired for your talents, not when you post a perfect photo captioned, "I'm fine." I mean in those moments when the mask falls, when there is no applause, no validation, no comforting distraction. When the room is quiet and the only eyes looking back at you are your own in the mirror. It's in those moments that the truth surfaces. Do you stand firmly with yourself, or do you abandon who you are? Have you ever noticed how certain women can enter a room without uttering a single word, without trying to capture attention, and yet all eyes inevitably turn toward them? Their presence feels magnetic, almost otherworldly, and aura that cannot be ignored. It isn't about flawless beauty, expensive clothes, or polished social charm. It isn't about status or achievements written on paper. What radiates from them is something far deeper, a quiet yet unshakable force that lives within. An inner harmony that whispers, "I know who I am, and I need no permission to exist as myself." This is the essence of true confidence, not the noisy kind that demands validation, but the serene kind that flows effortlessly, rooted in self-awareness and authenticity. It is the strength of a woman who has met her shadows, embraced her flaws, and discovered that her worth was never tied to external approval. This inner strength is not a mask, it is the unveiling of her most real self. And when a woman carries this truth, she doesn't need to seek attention. Attention seeks her. This is not the polished, practiced confidence of performance, the kind that bends itself to fit an audience or seeks applause. No, this is something far rarer. It is the quiet radiance that emerges when a woman awakens to her own essence, when mind, body, and soul move in unshakable harmony. Carl Jung described this as the return to the authentic self, the primal truth of who we are beneath the masks, beyond the wounds, and touched by the heavy hand of societal expectation. It is a homecoming to the soul's original ground, where nothing false can survive. A truly confident woman does more than recognize herself, she embodies that recognition. She doesn't just know her worth, she lives it, breathes it, and allows it to guide her choices. Her belief in herself is not borrowed from the outside world, nor is it constructed from fleeting validation. It is rooted in something deeper, something indestructible. Her confidence is born not from being seen, but from seeing herself clearly. This rare confidence is not a mask she puts on, it is the result of her deepest inward journey. She has walked through the labyrinth of her own soul. She has seen both her brilliance and her darkness, her tenderness and her wounds, and instead of denying or disguising them, she has embraced them all as parts of her wholeness. This is the secret. True confidence is born when a woman no longer runs from herself, when she accepts her shadow as much as her light. She no longer lives divided, she becomes whole. And wholeness radiates a power that no external approval can grant. Do you believe your own voice more than the opinions of others? Because without self-trust, confidence is nothing more than a costume, fragile, temporary, always waiting to be torn away. True confidence begins here, in the silent space where you choose to believe in yourself, even when no one else does. The truth is, most of us do not truly trust ourselves. Outwardly, we may appear strong, decisive, even inspiring to others. We play our roles with skill: the leader, the caregiver, the achiever, the unshakable friend. But when those roles fade, when the noise of the day dissolves into silence, and night lays our minds bare, another reality emerges. That is when the quiet doubt seeps in. We question our emotions. Am I too much? Too sensitive? Too cold? We question our choices. Did I take the wrong path? Am I living the life that was meant for me? And sometimes, we even question our very existence. Do I matter? Do I belong? This is the hidden fracture inside. So many of us thought we wear strength as a cloak, but underneath, we fear that strength is only borrowed, that it could collapse the moment someone sees the truth we hide. But here lies the paradox: real trust in yourself is not built by eliminating doubt. It is built by facing it, by walking straight into the shadows of uncertainty and standing your ground there. That is where confidence is forged, not in the absence of fear, but in the decision to remain whole in spite of it. Carl Jung once observed that modern humanity is no longer consumed by a crisis of religion or even of morality. The real crisis is far more intimate. It is a crisis of identity. We have lost touch with the self, that inner center that unites the fragments of who we are. And when this connection weakens, the first foundation to collapse is trust. Trust that we can rely on ourselves. Trust that our intuition carries wisdom. Trust that the voice within is not an enemy to be silenced but a guide waiting to be heard. Instead, we begin to outsource our compass. We let society, family, partners, and even strangers on screens dictate who we should be. We bury our own knowing beneath layers of roles, expectations, and fears. And yet, in the silence of our hearts, the self continues to whisper, softly but persistently, reminding us that our power lies not in pleasing others but in rediscovering that original bond with ourselves. True confidence begins here, in the daring act of listening inward, of choosing to believe that what you sense, feel, and know is valid. Without this, no external validation will ever satisfy, but with it, you carry a strength that no storm can uproot. Imagine yourself as a lighthouse standing in a vast and fog-covered sea. A lighthouse has only one true purpose: to shine its light, to guide, to remain steady against the chaos of the waves. If that light burns from within, fueled by your own source, nothing can extinguish it. Storms may rage, winds may howl, and the fog may thicken, but the radiance remains. You stand firm, rooted in the trust of your own being. But if that light depends on an external flame, on approval, validation, or borrowed strength, then the moment the storm rises, the light flickers and dies. The structure still stands, but without illumination. It becomes an empty tower in the darkness. This is the state of a person living without self-trust, outwardly present, but inwardly lost. They drift in the sea of life without a guiding beam, waiting for others to define their path. Jung would say that the work of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, begins when we reclaim that inner flame, when we stop outsourcing our light and dare to trust the quiet fire that has always been ours. Their light no longer belongs to them. It flickers and bends with every breath of recognition, every drop of praise, every whisper of "you should do this" from others. The fear of failure, of being judged, of life going wrong, doesn't rise from weakness but from a subtle, learned habit, the habit of handing over the power to define yourself into someone else's hands. And you live this way, your reflection becomes a collage of external voices: parents who told you who you should be, society that draws the boundaries of acceptable, social media that glorifies perfection, and a culture obsessed with instant success. Piece by piece, the authentic self is covered, and in its place stands a carefully constructed mask. The danger is not in wearing the mask for a day, but in forgetting you're wearing it at all. We repeat this pattern daily, so seamlessly, that it feels natural. Until one day you realize the person others applaud is not the person you truly are. You find yourself hesitating over the simplest decisions, paralyzed not by lack of options but by the fear of choosing wrong. You ask for advice from 5 different people, hoping for clarity, yet their voices only leave you more tangled in doubt and anxiety. You swallow your words when something feels off, convincing yourself your feelings might be too small, too inconvenient, too unworthy of being spoken aloud. You promise yourself, "Tonight I'll take care of me. Tonight I'll sleep early." But when midnight fades into 1 a.m., you're still curled up in the blue glow of your phone, scrolling, distracting, waiting for something, anything, to silence the restlessness within. This is the quiet erosion of self-trust. Not in dramatic failures, but in these ordinary, daily betrayals of your own voice. And over time, each small fracture accumulates, until you no longer know if the compass inside you still points anywhere at all. You scroll endlessly through things you don't truly care about, filling the silence with noise. You vow to wake early, to move your body, to journal, to breathe in stillness. But when the moment arrives, excuses rise quicker than discipline. "I'm busy. I'll start tomorrow." These are not harmless delays. Each time you break a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you carve a fracture in the foundation of self-trust. And fractures, left unattended, become walls. Little by little, you teach yourself an unconscious lesson: my voice is not important enough to honor. My needs are not urgent enough to matter. My inner compass cannot be relied upon. Carl Jung called this condition living from the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of the world. On the outside, the mask smiles, performs, achieves, but underneath, the authentic self waits in silence, starved of expression. And when the mask becomes too heavy, the soul begins to suffocate. When trust in yourself is stolen, life becomes a performance. You begin to sculpt yourself into an image you believe others want to see, pleasing, polished, acceptable. The mask becomes so familiar that you mistake it for truth. But beneath it, the original self, the wild, instinctual, radiant, sacred self, slips into the shadows of the unconscious, waiting to be remembered. This is why self-trust is not the same as the shallow confidence celebrated in slogans like girl, boss, or high value. Those identities are still costumes, fragile shells that crack under pressure. True self-trust is quieter, deeper, and unshakable. It is the knowing that does not depend on applause or approval. It is the state of standing in the middle of life's storm, uncertain, perhaps even afraid, but not abandoning yourself. It is rooted in a profound recognition: I know who I am, and no matter what happens, I remain with myself. This is the essence of authentic confidence, the kind Jung spoke of, the return to the self that no mask can replace. Like an ancient tree, she does not need to stretch higher to prove her worth. Her strength comes from the unseen, the deep roots reaching into the earth. In the same way, a woman with self-trust doesn't perform to impress or decorate herself for approval. She does not beg for recognition. Her presence itself speaks. Her energy commands respect, not through noise or display, but through the quiet gravity of her being. Her silence carries more weight than the loudest voice in the room. But let's turn inward and face reality. How many times have you whispered, "I know what I should do," only to act against it? How many times has your body spoken to you through the knot of anxiety in your stomach, the heaviness of exhaustion, the ache of tension in your shoulders, yet you ignored it? You pressed forward, betraying yourself, not because you were weak, but because you feared letting others down, because somewhere along the way, the approval of the world became louder than the truth within. When you betray your emotions long enough, something subtle but devastating happens. The bond between your mind and body begins to fracture. At first, it's barely noticeable. You dismiss a feeling here, silence a thought there. But over time, the distance grows. You stop recognizing the difference between right and wrong as it feels within you. Intuition, once a clear whisper, becomes muffled and blurred. Decisions lose their soul and turn into mechanical responses. You move through life like an instrument playing someone else's notes, a machine executing expectations. The sacred pulse of your being is muted. And perhaps the most tragic part is this: you no longer feel yourself. You no longer remember what it is to trust the rhythm of your own breath, the wisdom of your own body, the compass of your own heart. This is why self-trust cannot be learned from a textbook, copied from a motivational quote, or borrowed from someone else's advice. It cannot be taught as information. It must be lived into. It must be become. To become someone rooted in self-trust, you must relearn one sacred art: listening. Not the kind of listening you've been conditioned to do, listening to reply, to fix, to avoid conflict, or to please, but a deeper listening, the kind that requires silence, stillness, and the courage to turn inward. It is the practice of hearing the faint whispers of your soul. Those subtle truths you buried beneath years of noise, expectations, and neglect. Self-trust begins when you dare to believe that even your fears, your shadows, and your unpolished thoughts deserve to be heard. It is not about silencing the trembling voice within, but honoring it. It is trusting your intuition even when the world laughs at it, even when logic dismisses it, even when you cannot yet explain it. This listening is radical because it reclaims what was taken from you, the right to believe yourself. And in this reclamation, something extraordinary happens. Your life stops being a performance for others and becomes a conversation with your own soul. And this shift is subtle yet transformative. Moving from the question, "What do they think?" to the question, "What do I truly feel?" Carl Jung taught that when we lack self-trust, we become vulnerable to the grip of the shadow. The shadow then takes the driver's seat, pulling us into patterns of self-doubt, manipulation, and the haunting belief that we are never enough. We seek validation outside because inwardly, we do not believe in our own ground. But when self-trust awakens, everything changes. You reclaim authority over your psychological system. Instead of being dragged by unconscious impulses, you become aware. You no longer live as a puppet of shadow projections, yours or others. You stop reacting automatically and begin responding from a place of centered clarity. Self-trust is the key that transforms raw survival into conscious living. It is the moment you no longer ask, "Am I enough for them?" but declare, "I am enough for myself." You begin to respond selectively, consciously, sovereignly. You are no longer pulled by every demand, every glance, every opinion. Instead, you act from a rooted place, as though life itself moves through you with intention. And here lies a remarkable truth. Self-trust makes a woman magnetic. Not magnetic in the fleeting, seductive sense of attraction, but in the way ancient fire draws people near. It is not the glitter of performance but the gravity of presence. Others feel it without knowing why. Sensing the quiet steadiness that does not need to prove, persuade, or compete. Self-trust, as Jung implied, is not a polished skill to be practiced like an instrument. It is a sacred homecoming, a return to the higher, deeper, truer self, the one buried beneath masks, roles, and external noise. No one can hand it to you. No certificate, no praise, no partner, no mentor can deliver it. It is something only you can awaken by daring to no longer abandon yourself. But if you are willing to walk through fear, through the lying voices in your mind, through the old wounds that still ache in silence, you will touch it. You will find that self-trust was never lost, only buried beneath layers of forgetting. So let these ideas settle for a moment. Do not force them into belief. Do not rush to argue or explain them away. Let them linger, like a seed resting in the soil, unseen but alive. And then watch. Because seeds do not sprout in noise, but in stillness. What begins to stir within you may be subtle at first, a quiet voice, a gentle certainty, a sense that you no longer need to look outside yourself for every answer. That is the beginning of return. And when self-trust begins to awaken, even in the smallest gesture, a single nod to your true emotions, a pause before saying yes, a step back from the weight of old expectations, you will uncover an undeniable truth. Within every woman coexists a currents of energy. One is the gentle yet fierce call of the authentic self, steady and luminous. The other is the bleeding whisper of unhealed wounds, echoing the voices of the past. The question isn't whether you are feminine, worthy, or strong. The real question is, which voice will you allow to lead your life? Because the authentic self does not shout. It doesn't demand attention with drama or noise. It waits, quietly, faithfully, for you to turn inward and listen. It's whether you are living from the goddess within or being led by your cracks. The distinction is everything. The woman in goddess energy does not need to chase, prove, or perform. Her presence nourishes, not because she strives, but because she radiates. She is anchored, rooted, and sovereign. Her choices come from clarity, not fear. The woman in wound energy moves differently. She may look composed on the outside, yet inside she bleeds in silence. She says yes when her body screams no. She stays when her soul longs to leave. Her energy bends to please, defend, or survive. She wears a mask so polished that even she forgets the face beneath it. One energy draws you closer to the truth of who you are. The other keeps you locked in patterns that protect the wound but starve the soul. Carl Jung didn't call them feminine energies, but his theories on the anima, shadow, and individuation mirror the same truth. He saw that there is a profound difference between a woman reconciled with her inner world and one still ruled by her unhealed wounds. A woman in goddess energy is not a fantasy of softness or perfection. She is not submissive, nor does she hide behind pleasing smiles. Instead, she embodies a quiet strength, an authority that doesn't shout yet cannot be ignored. Her presence is like entering a sanctuary. You feel calmer in her company. Not because she tries to comfort you, but because she is at home within herself. This rootedness allows her to hold paradoxes, gentle yet fierce, yielding yet immovable, vulnerable yet unbreakable. She doesn't avoid her shadow. She has befriended it. She knows her wounds, but they do not command her. And this integration is what Jung saw as the path of individuation, becoming whole, not flawless. She doesn't compete for attention because she belongs to herself. She moves with the grace of someone who knows her worth without needing to shout it. She can say no without trembling, cry without shame, and love without losing herself. She has walked through the inferno of her inner world and returned not with resentment but with understanding. Her scars do not weaken her. They have become sacred inscriptions of survival and transformation. This woman is not untouchable, but she is unshakable. She carries both the softness of water and the solidity of stone. In Jungian terms, she has crossed the threshold of individuation, reclaiming the lost fragments of herself, integrating them into a living wholeness. Such a woman does not try to be magnetic, yet she is. Her presence does not seduce. It resonates. Others feel it without knowing why, because she has aligned with something eternal within herself. In contrast, a woman in wound energy lives in reaction, in defense. She may appear dazzling, sharp, or high value, but inside she is still a trembling girl, afraid of abandonment, betrayal, or not being chosen. She needs external validation to feel worthy. Every compliment is a brief oxygen mask, every silence a suffocating void. She is vulnerable to the smallest rejection, anxious if a text goes unanswered, restless if she isn't reassured. Her confidence is borrowed, not built. The image she projects, the perfect partner, the unstoppable achiever, the enviable woman, is not rooted in her essence but in a desperate attempt to cover the wound. She says yes when she wants to say no, gives when she is empty, smiles when she is aching, all in the hope that someone will finally prove her enough. But beneath the performance lives a quiet panic. If they saw the real me, would they stay? And like the woman in goddess energy, she hasn't yet descended into her inner depths. She runs from the pain, and in running, she becomes enslaved to it. Deep in her unconscious, she carries a map of love tied to unhealed wounds. Jung called these complexes, psychological knots formed from childhood traumas, betrayals, or unmet needs. They don't vanish. They live on, disguised, weaving themselves into behaviors, words, and choices that seem random but are, in truth, the wound speaking, demanding recognition, demanding to be healed. Imagine two women entering a party. The first, living from goddess energy, walks in without needing the room to notice her. She is at ease with herself. Her presence is felt rather than performed. She engages in conversation naturally, not calculating every word to gain approval. She can laugh freely, withdraw gracefully, or leave without regret because her worth does not depend on how others receive her. The second, living from wound energy, enters with a different atmosphere. Her smile may be brighter, her laughter louder, but beneath it lies a vigilant scanning. Who is watching me? Am I being chosen? Do I measure up? Every interaction is a silent test, every glance a subtle judgment. Her nervous system is tuned not to authenticity but to survival. She flirts not only with people, but with validation itself. One radiates because she is rooted. The other performs because she is fractured. And Jung's insight is sharp here. The unconscious directs our lives until we bring it into consciousness. Without awareness, the woman in wound energy is not free. She is driven by the very complexes she does not see. One glides in like a cool breeze. She doesn't announce herself, yet somehow the air shifts when she arrives. You can't take your eyes off her, not because she demands it, but because her very being carries a rare stillness. Her eyes don't seek, they rest. They say without words, I am here. Her posture is open and hurried, as if her body has nothing to prove. She belongs to herself, and because of that, others feel drawn to her presence. The other is equally beautiful, striking in her appearance, but the energy is different. Beneath the surface radiance is a slight tension, the kind you sense before you see. Her eyes move quickly, scanning who noticed her entrance. Her laugh rings louder than it needs to, carrying not only joy but an unspoken plea. See me, choose me, approve of me. Her beauty dazzles, but it does not anchor. Instead, it flickers, dependent on the gaze of others to remain alive. One radiates from within, the other burns fuel from without. This is the difference between self-possession and self-performance, between the woman who has walked through her inner darkness and found peace, and the woman still haunted by the shadows she has not faced. Jung would say, the first has integrated her shadow, the second is still ruled by it. You may not be able to name the feeling, but you sense it. One is present, the other is performing. Presence requires no costume, no script, no audience. Performance, however, feeds on them. A woman in goddess energy doesn't try to control the room. She doesn't need to. She feels it. Her awareness reaches beneath the surface, attuned not only to herself but to the silent rhythm of the space around her. She doesn't force others to follow, yet without effort they slow their pace in her company. She moves like water, shaping without pushing, influencing without demanding. In Jungian terms, she has entered the path of individuation, the reunion of ego and self, of light and shadow. She has seen her inner fractures and, instead of hiding them, she has learned to carry them with grace. She is no longer ruled unconsciously by the archetypes of maiden, mother, lover, or shadowed victim. She lives with them consciously. She knows the storm inside her, yet chooses not to be thrown by its winds. This is why her presence feels magnetic. It is not performance. It is wholeness. Conversely, a woman in wound energy is often hijacked by unintegrated archetypes. The shadow, for instance, rises like an uninvited guest, pushing her to overreact to what she despises in others, precisely because it is what she cannot accept within herself. What she condemns most fiercely is often a mirror of her own hidden pain. At other times, an immature animal binds her in illusions of romance, trapping her in fantasies of savior-like love. She yearns for a partner who will rescue her from loneliness or fear, casting him in the role of a psychological redeemer. But such longings rarely lead to true intimacy. Instead, they weave cycles of dependency, heartbreak, and disillusionment. In this way, wound energy keeps her entangled. It blinds her to her own wholeness, persuades her that her worth rests in being chosen, validated, or completed by another. Rather than moving from her center, she is pulled by unconscious strings, her own unhealed complexes, disguised as love, fear, or desire. These women often repeat patterns without realizing it, falling for the wrong partners, burning themselves out with overwork, feeling pierced by the smallest slight, yet always concluding that the fault lies within them. What they are experiencing is not weakness, but the echo of unhealed wounds guiding their choices. They are not broken. They are simply living from their wounds instead of their self. In contrast, within Christian symbolism, the Virgin Mary stands as a profound archetype of goddess energy. She embodies not fragility, but a sacred steadiness. Her presence radiates compassion without submission, gentleness without weakness, surrender without loss of dignity. In Jungian terms, she reflects the fully integrated feminine, the union of purity and power, receptivity and strength, light and shadow. She holds no political power, no earthly authority. She does not command through force or persuasion, yet her presence radiates an inner strength that outlasts empires. Mary embodies acceptance, not passivity, trust, not naivety. When faced with the angel's impossible message, she does not collapse into fear or rebellion. She listens. She consents. She embraces her mission with quiet resolve. This is goddess energy in its clearest form, an alignment with the self, surrender that does not erase individuality but deepens it. Now, compare this with Eve, the first woman, whose story is equally worth contemplating. Eve is not evil, not a villain, but she is the classic symbol of a woman led by wound and unconscious desire. She reaches for the fruit not out of malice, but out of yearning, hunger, a restless sense of not enough. She listens, but not to her inner truth. She listens to the serpent, the projection of her shadow, the whisper of temptation. Eve represents what happens when feminine energy is hijacked by unconscious forces, desire, and tethered from wisdom, curiosity, and moored from discernment. Mary stands as the image of integration, desire united with faith, humility joined with strength. Eve reveals the dangers of fragmentation, desire divorced from inner clarity, the wound seeking fulfillment outside itself. She listens to the serpent, a timeless symbol of the unintegrated unconscious. Her action does not rise from conscious clarity, but from a tangled complex of power, longing, curiosity, and aching desire to transcend limits. This is not sin in the moralistic sense, but shadow acting without awareness. And so her choice leads her, and symbolically, all of humanity, into a state of full. As Jung explained, when the shadow is denied, it does not disappear. It rules from within. What we exile in ourselves returns, in distorted form, through compulsions, repeated mistakes, and unchosen reactions. Eve's act is not only a story of disobedience. It is a mythic portrayal of what happens when we are driven by what we cannot yet face in ourselves. Mary, by contrast, shows the opposite path, the conscious embrace of the unknown. The yes that arises not from fear or restless hunger, but from trust and inner clarity. Together, Eve and Mary form a polarity within the feminine psyche. Two mirrors of how women may meet life, either through unhealed wounds or through the integration of self and shadow. If you've ever caught yourself acting not from true desire, but from the fear of being abandoned or overlooked, pause. That is not weakness. It is a doorway. Write that moment down in a journal, in a quiet reflection, or even as a simple comment below. Each recognition is a marker on the path of shifting from living through wounds to living from the self. The truth is, no woman is born already in her goddess state. No one remains endlessly serene, perfectly radiant, and touched by doubt or pain. To pretend otherwise is to fall into another illusion. Every woman carries shadows. Every woman bleeds somewhere inside. What matters is not the absence of wounds, but the courage to see them and the willingness to walk with them consciously. This is individuation in the Jungian sense, the process of becoming whole. The goddess within is not a mask of perfection. She is the woman who knows both her fragility and her fire, who has met her shadows and chosen not to be ruled by them. The difference lies in choice. Jung once said, "The sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being." A woman in goddess energy does not deny her darkness. She enters it. She listens to it. She embraces it without shame, knowing that only through recognition does transformation occur. Her wounds are not erased. They are transfigured into wisdom. Her fears are not buried. They are softened into compassion. She does not need to announce that she loves herself, because her life itself bears witness. The way she speaks to herself, the way she sets her boundaries, the way she refuses to abandon her own soul. These are the quiet proofs of self-love. She treats herself as the one she has vowed never to leave, never to betray. If goddess energy is the state of a woman who has transcended her wounds, then confidence is the light reflected from that journey. Confidence is not a performance. It is not louder laughter, higher heels, or sharper words. True confidence, as Jung would suggest, rises when the self and the shadow are no longer enemies. It is the quiet assurance of a woman who has met the darkest corners of her psyche and discovered that she can survive them. It is the rootedness of someone who knows she is both fragile and unbreakable, both soft and powerful, both wounded and whole. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of inner alignment. A woman can still tremble, but she does not betray herself. She can still fail, but she does not collapse into shame. She can still be alone, but she does not feel abandoned, because she belongs to herself. First, in Carl Jung's perspective, confidence isn't the hollow repetition of positive affirmations, a straightened posture, or a calculated smile. It is the inevitable outcome of a soul that has found its center. It isn't forged. It is awakened from within. Building on the previous section, where we distinguished between a woman acting from her wounds and one living from herself, we now delve deeper into something Jung alluded to throughout his work. True confidence cannot exist if the ego has not confronted its shadow. When a woman denies her shadow, she becomes fragmented. She overcompensates, masks her insecurities, and builds a fragile identity that shatters under the weight of rejection or failure. But when she dares to descend into her inner underworld, she learns that the shadow is not her enemy. It is her mirror. It reveals her suppressed desires, her fears, her unmet needs, and by integrating it, she reclaims her wholeness. This is why genuine confidence feels different. It doesn't demand attention, because it isn't a performance. It doesn't falter when unseen, because it isn't built on validation. It simply radiates, quietly but unmistakably, from a woman who has befriended the parts of herself she once feared. If the journey of individuation has not begun, and if the unconscious still controls us from behind the scenes, our lives remain fragile, swayed by forces we do not understand. Imagine a mighty tree. What we see, its trunk, its canopy, its fruits, is only the surface. The true vitality lies in its roots, hidden beneath the earth. A confident woman is like this tree. Her roots sink deep into the soil of her own soul. She has touched the darkness below, the tangled knots of shadow, wounds, and forgotten fears. She has not cut them away but woven them into her foundation. Because of this, her trunk stands firm even when storms come. Without roots, a tree topples in the first strong wind. Without inner work, a woman's confidence collapses at the first hint of rejection or failure. But when she has rooted herself in self-knowledge, her branches rise naturally toward the light. Her presence offers shade, fruit, and beauty, not because she strives to, but because it is her nature. Those roots are self-sustaining, the acceptance of both light and shadow, and the courage to no longer fear herself. Because of this, she does not need to persuade others of her worth. She already knows it, not as an idea but as a lived truth. In Jungian psychology, true confidence emerges only when the ego no longer exhausts itself in hiding wounds. An immature ego cannot bear its own imperfections. It strains to build a flawless mask, endlessly performing for the gaze of others, but such performances are brittle, easily cracked by silence, criticism, or rejection. The mature ego, however, does not deny its cracks. It learns to see them as entrances into deeper truth. By accepting the shadow, it softens, relaxes, and finds its natural rhythm. Confidence then is not a show, but a quiet steadiness, the radiance of someone who is no longer at war with herself. In those moments, you become tense, easily pierced by the smallest remark. A casual comment, a passing glance, is enough to shake your ground. That is not confidence. It is defensiveness disguised as strength, and like a fragile shell, it cracks at the slightest pressure. Jung reminds us that authentic strength is not built by protecting the surface. It is born only when we dare to descend into the depths of our own soul, into the places where repressed memories sleep, where unspoken wounds shape our desires, and where the unacknowledged shadow waits. This descent is not a fall, but a journey. It is the act of reclaiming what we once abandoned within ourselves. And when these hidden parts are faced, rather than feared, they become roots of unshakable stability. That is why true confidence feels quiet, almost understated. It does not need to shout. It simply is. It is this very descent that opens the door to ascent. True confidence is not found in borrowed light, but in the courage to walk into darkness without losing yourself. Perhaps this is where you pause, not to analyze, not to defend, but to feel. What is your body whispering as you read these words? A tightening in the chest, or restless thought that wants to move away, or a stillness, as if something deep within recognizes the truth. You may picture a woman who dazzles in the world, sharp, accomplished, admired, yet when the lights fade, and she is left with her own silence, she trembles, for her strength was built on applause, not on roots. Like a magnificent building without a foundation, even a single tremor can bring everything crashing down. In contrast, a truly confident woman, though she may stumble, fail, or lose her way, does not collapse. She gathers the fragments of her experience and lets them shape a deeper understanding of herself. Each one becomes not proof of weakness, but an opening through which authentic healing can enter. Jung called this the path of individuation, the soul's great pilgrimage. It is the movement of the ego through the personal unconscious, the descent into shadow, and the eventual reunion with the true self. When this happens, the ego is not destroyed. It is not erased. It is placed back into its rightful role. No longer the domineering master, but the faithful servant, the honest representative of the vast inner world. From this alignment, confidence no longer rises as a mask worn for others. It flows instead like breath, and force, natural, alive. As Jung once said, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. Words may echo, but it is action born from the self that reveals true confidence. This seemingly simple statement carries a truth so fundamental that we often overlook it. Self-trust is not a gift granted to a chosen few, nor is it a secret that can be unlocked through rituals or mantras alone. It is not an idea, it is a lived reality, forged through repetition, through the everyday alignment of word and action. You do not wake one morning suddenly filled with unshakable self-belief, just as a tree does not grow overnight into its full height. The roots of trust are laid in small, consistent moments, when you rise after failure, when you keep the promise you made to yourself even when no one is watching, when you choose integrity over convenience. Positive affirmations may inspire, but without action they are like seeds scattered on stone, full of potential, yet never rooted. The soil of self-trust is consistency. Each time you follow through on what you told yourself you would do, you carve a deeper channel of reliability within. Over time, these channels form a riverbed, carrying you with quiet strength. Even when storms come, true confidence, then, is not a mask or a performance. It is the natural consequence of self-loyalty. It rises when the inner and outer selves no longer live in contradiction. When your words are not empty echoes but living acts, and in that state, you do not need to convince yourself or others of your worth, because you embody it. In psychology, this concept is often described as inner integrity, the state in which our intentions, emotions, and actions flow in the same current rather than pulling us in opposing directions. It is the quiet alignment of the psyche, when the conscious and unconscious no longer wrestle against one another but begin to cooperate. Consider a simple promise: tomorrow, I will wake up early. If the following morning you silence the alarm and return to sleep, on the surface it may appear trivial. You may laugh it off as nothing more than a small failure of discipline. Yet beneath the surface, your psyche records something far more significant. The unconscious mind does not reason in the same way the conscious mind does. It does not make excuses, rationalizations, or half-hearted justifications. Instead, it keeps score. It learns not from what you intend, but from what you actually do. Each time your words and your actions diverge, the unconscious begins to withdraw its trust in you. A fracture appears in the relationship you hold with yourself. This is why broken promises, even the smallest ones, erode confidence. They whisper to the unconscious, her words cannot be relied upon. Over time, this dissonance creates an inner split, where the ego speaks one language while the deeper self listens to another. You understood this well. When the inner world is at war, the outer world reflects it. True self-trust is not earned through dramatic declarations, but through 1,000 quiet consistencies. Each time you act in harmony with what you promised yourself, you stitch together the threads of inner integrity. And when enough threads have been woven, you carry within you something far greater than discipline. You carry the unshakable knowing that your soul and your actions move as one. If repeated often enough, this process becomes a form of unconscious learning, a pattern of learned unreliability. The psyche absorbs it the way a child absorbs the world around them. Imagine a child whose parents repeatedly break promises: I'll be there. Yet they never arrive. I'll listen, yet they turn away. At first, the child feels hurt, even betrayed. But in time, the hurt solidifies into resignation. They stop expecting, they stop hoping, and most tragically, they stop trusting. The same dynamic unfolds within you when you repeatedly fail to honor your own word. Each unkept promise, no matter how small, teaches your unconscious that your voice cannot be trusted. You might say, I'll change, but your body no longer rises to meet that intention. You might whisper, tomorrow will be different, but your intuition grows quiet, doubting whether it should guide you at all. Motivation withers, not because you lack ambition, but because the inner bond of trust has been eroded. But the opposite is also true. And here lies the wonder. Every time you keep your word to yourself, No matter how insignificant it seems, completing that short workout, choosing water over distraction, resisting the urge to return to someone who doesn't honor you. You lay down another stone in the foundation of inner trust. Your psyche notices. Your body notices. Even the unconscious, that deep, ancient part of you, records it with precision. Modern behavioral studies confirm what ancient wisdom intuited. Repeated actions carve new neural pathways. Each act of consistency strengthens the circuitry of self-trust, reinforcing the truth that your word matters. What begins as a fragile thread gradually becomes a woven fabric of inner reliability, and with each small victory, the inner voice that once grew silent begins to whisper again, guiding you forward. With clarity and strength, when you consistently follow through, something profound begins to shift within. The quiet thought, "I control my life," is no longer an empty affirmation. It becomes a lived reality. This sense of inner reliability nurtures a profound safety, and out of that safety grows true confidence. Not the brittle kind that demands applause or external recognition, but the steady, unshakable assurance that you will not betray yourself. In this light, confidence is not about whether others believe in you, admire you, or acknowledge your worth. Their voices fade in comparison to the deeper truth. If I say I will, then I will. That simple knowing is stronger than any compliment, more enduring than any title, and more nourishing than fleeting approval. This is the most powerful foundation upon which confidence is built, not through grand declarations or dramatic transformations, but through small, repeated acts of fidelity to yourself. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how ordinary, you send a signal deep into the unconscious. I am trustworthy. I am reliable. I am safe within my own hands. From the perspective of behavioral psychology, this process is not accidental but systematic. Following through creates a self-reinforcing loop. Each completed action, a workout finished, a task done when it was meant to be done, a boundary honored, generates an internal reward. This reward is not just pride, but a felt sense of control, autonomy, and worth. Step by step, you teach your nervous system that life is not chaos, but a rhythm you can participate in. And as this rhythm strengthens, you no longer cling to external validation to steady yourself. You no longer fear the silence of being unseen. Instead, you walk with the assurance that you carry within you the most faithful ally, your own word. This practice does more than simply boost self-esteem. It restructures the very architecture of the mind, teaching the brain to build realistic trust based on lived experience rather than on fragile hopes or empty affirmations. Picture yourself as both the ruler and the citizen of your inner nation. If the ruler continually makes promises and breaks them, the citizens will grow restless, doubtful, even rebellious. Order collapses, and chaos begins to reign. Commands lose their power because words no longer carry weight. But imagine the opposite. Imagine a ruler who speaks carefully, promises thoughtfully, and follows through on every word. Even the smallest commitments are honored. Over time, the citizens begin to relax. Harmony spreads. Creativity flourishes. Energy that was once wasted on suspicion and conflict becomes available for growth. In this inner society, peace becomes the natural climate, and confidence arises effortlessly, not as a performance, but as a state of being. So, the question stands, how do you build this resilient inner nation? How do you make each promise a cornerstone rather than a passing breeze? The answer is not found in a single leap, but in a journey of small, concrete steps, repeated with patience and reverence, a journey where trust is sewn thread by thread, until it becomes an unbreakable fabric. Slowly, sustainably, and authentically, you learn to live as both a wise leader and a loyal citizen of your own soul. And this, more than praise, more than fleeting validation, is where true confidence is born. Secret number 4, the foundation of self-trust. If every promise you keep to yourself as a brick. Then self-trust is the home built from those bricks. And no home, no matter how beautiful its design, can stand strong without a foundation. Keeping your word to yourself may sound almost too simple. Yet it is the cornerstone upon which a reliable self is built. Each promise fulfilled is not just an isolated act, it is the laying of the first stone in a structure that will protect you through storms, doubts, and the shifting seasons of life. Think of it this way: when you honor your own words, you're not just proving discipline, you are carving out a deeper ego, an inner core that doesn't collapse at the first gust of external pressure. Secret number 1, then, is this: keep your word to yourself. Imagine yourself on a great psychological mountain. The summit represents unshakable confidence, and each step upward is a small but intentional commitment honored. Waking up early, choosing nourishing food, tending to your body, refusing to measure yourself against others. These are not dramatic leaps but steady steps upward. Sometimes these steps are silent. No applause follows, no recognition arrives, and yet, these are the moments that matter most. Because the mountain doesn't care for applause, it rewards persistence. Every step you take in silence strengthens your footing, expands your breath, and proves to your unconscious mind that you are a person who follows through. And over time, step by step, brick by brick, you are not merely climbing, you are building, constructing an inner refuge so strong that no storm outside can bring it down. It is this silent repetition, then celebrated, almost invisible act of keeping your word, that lays down a sturdy path, a path you can walk tomorrow without hesitation, without trembling. Keeping your word to yourself does more than sharpen discipline. Discipline is only the surface layer. What it truly shapes is identity. Each fulfilled promise whispers, "This is who I am. I am someone who follows through." Over time, that whisper becomes a voice, and that voice becomes the ground you stand on. From the depths of psychoanalysis, particularly through the lens of Carl Jung, this process carries an even deeper significance. Every time you keep your word to yourself, you are not simply ticking off a task. You are laying stones for a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, the ego. That surface actor navigating daily life begins to align with the deeper self, the soul that longs to live authentically. Each small promise honored is not just a behavioral success. It is an act of reconciliation between the visible and the hidden, between the rational planner and the dreamer dwelling in your depths. And this is not a one-way current. When you keep your word, you send a signal into the dark waters of the unconscious: I am ready. I can be trusted. And the unconscious, carrying the weight of ancestral memory and ancient wisdom, responds. It answers not with applause, but with clarity, with sharper intuition, with a quiet but unshakable sense of autonomy, the kind no one can give you from the outside. This is the true alchemy of self-trust, the invisible dialogue between the conscious will and the unconscious depths, forged in the smallest promises kept. Imagine a woman who longs to become confident. She reads countless books, highlights passages, takes notes from inspiring videos, and fills her journal with strategies. And yet, when she looks in the mirror or faces the day, she still feels unsteady. Why? Because despite her efforts, she quietly breaks the small promises she makes to herself. She swears she will stick to her gym schedule, but the commitment slips. She vows to walk away from a toxic relationship, yet she stays. She promises to stop belittling herself in front of others, yet the old habit creeps in. All the knowledge she gathers is valuable, but without action it drifts through her like a breeze, stirring her for a moment, but leaving no roots. Confidence cannot grow in such shifting soil. The truth is, the confidence she seeks isn't somewhere far away, hidden in another book or in someone else's approval. It is already within her, waiting patiently in the first promise she makes and keeps. Not the grand, sweeping vows, but the small, almost ordinary commitments honored day by day. This is where real transformation begins. Not in imagining yourself as a different person, but in proving to yourself, one small act at a time, that you can be trusted. So where should you begin? Not with grand declarations, but with the quiet courage of consistency. Choose one simple promise. Drink a glass of water first thing in the morning. Write down 3 grateful thoughts before bed. Take a 10-minute walk every afternoon, and follow through. These small acts are not trivial. They are the foundation stones of self-trust, the soil from which unshakable confidence grows. Below is a daily practice, a specific exercise, designed to help you begin laying this foundation in your own life. First exercise, laying the foundation. Choose 3 simple promises to yourself for the next 7 days. The key is to make them small, specific, and measurable. This is not the time for sweeping vows or impossible ambitions. If you usually wake up at 8 o'clock a.m., don't demand a sudden leap to 5:30 a.m. Instead, choose something you can realistically honor, like waking at 7 o'clock a.m. 5 days a week, journaling for 5 minutes before bed, or avoiding social media after 10 p.m. Write these promises on paper, not in your head, not just as a passing thought, but in visible ink. Place this paper where you will see it daily: your desk, your mirror, your nightstand. In Jungian terms, this act transforms vague intention into a ritual. It makes the unconscious take notice. These words become more than reminders. They become symbols of your contract with yourself. Second exercise, marking the victory. Each time you keep one of your promises, mark it down, draw a line, make a check, or place a symbol beside it. This small act of recording is not about productivity. It is about recognition. But more importantly, pause for a breath after each success. Feel the subtle yet profound sensation. I did what I said I would do. This moment may seem quiet, almost too ordinary to matter, but it is the exact place where confidence begins. With each check mark, you send a message to your unconscious: I can be trusted. In return, the unconscious slowly opens its doors, granting you clarity, intuition, and a calm strength no one else can give you. Over time, these repeated acts weave together a deeper truth. You are no longer someone who merely hopes for change. You are someone who keeps promises, and therefore someone who can lead yourself with certainty. This feeling, that quiet pulse of "I did what I said I would do," is not trivial. It is the signal your nervous system and unconscious register as the beginning of trust rebuilt from within. Now comes the final and most crucial step. If you fail one day, do not punish yourself. Failure is not a fracture in the foundation. It is part of the building process. Self-trust is not carved from perfection, but from persistence and honesty. Every time you choose not to give up, you teach your body and mind the most healing message of all: I am worth coming back to. After 7 days, you face a choice. You may decide to expand your promises, to attempt larger commitments, or you may simply remain with the same 3, but deepen their quality. Both paths are equally powerful. For example, if you began with 5 minutes of journaling, you might now add a single line describing your emotions that day. If you committed to waking earlier, you might now pair it with a short stretch or a glass of water. Bit by bit, layer by layer, you expand the boundaries of confidence, not through dramatic declarations or sudden reinventions, but through small repeated actions, honored with respect. This is how the first bricks of inner strength are laid. And once this foundation of self-trust is strong enough, a new power awakens, one that cannot be learned from books or borrowed from others. Secret number 2: hone your intuition. Once you begin laying the foundation by keeping your promises, you may notice a subtle shift. You feel steadier, more rooted, as though your inner ground no longer trembles beneath you. Yet this is only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lies an ancient and often neglected source of wisdom. Intuition. If self-trust is the soil in which inner strength grows, then intuition is the underground river that nourishes it. Keeping your word creates trust. Intuition, in turn, becomes the channel of communication between your conscious self and the deeper layers of your psyche. Carl Jung described intuition as one of the four fundamental psychological functions, alongside sensation, thinking, and feeling. But in modern life, intuition has been nearly silenced, not because it has vanished, but because we have forgotten how to listen. We've trained ourselves to respond only to logic, schedules, and external validation, dismissing the quiet murmur of inner knowing. Intuition does not speak in arguments or explanations. It does not arrive with statistics, bullet points, or proofs. Instead, it whispers through bodily sensations, subtle emotions, fleeting images, and sudden clarity. It is the shiver on your skin when something feels wrong, the expansion in your chest when something feels right, the dream that lingers in your mind as if trying to deliver a message from a deeper realm. And yet, intuition is not irrational. It is pre-rational, the wisdom of the unconscious speaking before the conscious mind has caught up. When you practice listening, you discover that intuition is not mysterious at all. It is the most natural voice you carry, the voice you were born with but learn to silence in the noise of comparison, expectation, and fear. Intuition rarely arrives as a definitive answer stamped with certainty. It does not hand you a neatly written instruction. Instead, it slips into your awareness like a faint breeze brushing across your skin, a sudden heaviness in your chest when you're near someone whose presence feels unsafe, or an almost childlike lightness spreading through your body when you step into a space that feels aligned. The difficulty is not that intuition is absent, but that we've learned to dismiss it. We live in a culture that prizes reason, evidence, and data above all else, while quietly exiling the body, the very vessel that stores our lived experiences, ancestral memory, and instinctual knowing. In doing so, we've silenced one of the most profound channels of communication we possess. Jung observed that what we call intuition is often the unconscious sending subtle messages to the conscious mind, not in words, but through bodily impressions, that inexplicable sense that someone isn't trustworthy after a single handshake, that unease that tightens your gut the moment you step into a room that carries hidden hostility, or the opposite, a serenity that settles in your bones before your rational mind can explain why. These are not accidents, they are signals. The unconscious does not shout, it whispers. And, like any living relationship, intuition only deepens when it is acknowledged. When you ignore its nudges again and again, it recedes into silence. But when you pause to notice, to respect its presence, you teach your inner world that you are listening. And slowly, intuition learns to trust you as much as you are learning to trust it. To awaken intuition, you must return to its home, your body, not as a machine to be tuned or pushed, but as a living map, constantly offering signals and guidance in every moment of your life. The body is not simply flesh and bone. It is memory, instinct, and wisdom condensed into sensation. And to access that wisdom, you don't need to become a mystic or reach enlightenment. You need only begin humbly, concretely, with the smallest acts of listening. One way to start is simple. Before making a decision, resist the urge to gather endless opinions or intellectual proofs. Instead, create space for your inner compass to speak. Sit quietly for 3 minutes. Place your hand gently on your chest. Breathe deeply and ask yourself, if I choose this, how will it feel in my body? Then notice if your chest feels lighter, your heart warmer, your breath fuller, your body more expansive. It may be pointing toward alignment. If, on the other hand, your stomach knots, your chest tightens, your neck stiffens, or your breath shortens, it may be a sign you are pushing yourself against your deeper truth. At first, these signals may feel faint, drowned out by habit, doubt, or logic. But each time you pause, breathe, and notice, you sharpen your ability to interpret the body's language. Over time, these whispers grow clearer, steadier, until they begin to feel like a trusted companion walking beside you. Your unconscious is finally heard. Your intuition is no longer ignored. These signals from your body are not random or meaningless. They are not accidents of biology. They are the living, wordless voice of your unconscious. Every flutter in your stomach, every tightness in your chest, every moment of ease or tension is a message. A message shaped by thousands of lived experiences stored deep in your nervous system. Your body remembers what your conscious mind forgets, and in its reflexes, its shifts, its whispers, it tells you the truth. To reconnect with this truth, practice a simple yet powerful exercise for 7 days. Each day, choose a quiet moment. Silence the noise around you. Put your phone away. Close the door. Sit in stillness. Then gently ask yourself, what is my body feeling right now? Do not analyze. Do not judge. Do not twist the answer to fit your expectations. Simply notice. Perhaps you feel heavy. Perhaps you feel restless. Perhaps you feel warm, open, safe. Whatever rises, honor it without resistance. Take one adjective, just one, write it down on paper. This small act turns a fleeting sensation into a conversation with your deeper self. Over time, this dialogue becomes clearer. At first, it may sound faint, like a distant whisper, but with patience, it grows louder, sharper, more trustworthy. One day, at a critical crossroads, you will notice something remarkable. You won't feel the same desperation to seek advice from everyone around you. You won't need to poll friends, experts, or endless online articles. You will already know, because your body will answer with clarity, and you will trust it not as a stranger, but as a companion who has never left your side. This is the turning point. When your body is no longer just flesh and bone, it becomes your compass, your anchor, your guide. Secret number 3, set boundaries to protect inner trust. Because the moment you begin to listen inwardly, something inevitable happens. You begin to notice what harms you. Things you once overlooked now stand out sharply. It is not because the world has suddenly grown more toxic. It is because you have stopped numbing yourself. You have stopped pretending that everything is fine. You have stopped silencing your inner signals. And in that moment, something essential becomes clear. Your awakening needs protection, and that protection takes form in one word: boundaries. Carl Jung never described boundaries as mere social skills. He understood them as spiritual acts, because in his language, every outer interaction mirrors an inner state. Every time you say yes when you mean no, your inner truth fractures a little. Every time you let someone invade, belittle, or dismiss your inner self-worth trembles. And when you allow these trespasses repeatedly, it is not just weakness. It is a sign that your own sense of value has become unstable. Boundaries are not walls. They are not punishments. They are not selfish demands. They are sacred lines you draw to remind yourself, I matter. They are the living evidence that your relationship with yourself has changed, that you have stopped abandoning your inner voice to appease the world. When you set a boundary, you are not shutting others out. You are letting your deeper self in. You are saying to your unconscious, I hear you. I will not betray you again. And that small act of courage restores the fragile bridge of trust within. And when boundaries erode, self-trust collapses. How can you possibly trust someone who does not protect themselves, even if that someone is you? Imagine you are the gatekeeper of a sacred temple. Within that temple rests your intuition, your clarity, your identity, your dreams, all that is most delicate and alive within you. If you allow anyone to walk in without respect, chaos soon follows. If you permit manipulation, criticism, or draining energy, you are not being kind. You are desecrating your own sacred space. Boundaries are not built to oppose others. They are not weapons or punishments. They are shields of devotion, meant to preserve the inner ground you have struggled and bled to build. In psychology, this truth is well recognized, particularly in trauma-related therapies. A lack of boundaries is seen as one of the most painful scars. It often belongs to those who were wounded early in life, children who grew up in households where their no was ignored, where emotions were silenced, where autonomy was over-controlled, where love had to be purchased with obedience or self-erasure. These children learned a dangerous lesson: to be accepted, they must abandon themselves. They carried that lesson into adulthood. And now, every time they struggle to set a boundary, the old wound whispers, "You don't deserve to protect yourself." But here lies the truth: boundaries are the medicine for that wound. Each time you draw a line, you teach your nervous system a new story. You are no longer the helpless child. You are the guardian of the temple now. As adults, they repeat this old pattern. They yield when they long to resist. They diminish themselves so others can shine. They stay silent when their voice aches to be heard. They endure what harms them, as if endurance is the only way to survive. But survival is not the same as living. And the truth is, you do not have to keep carrying this inheritance of silence. You can begin to change the pattern, one choice at a time, one small act of self-protection at a time. So, how do you begin? Not with grand declarations, not with ultimatums, but with gentle, daily practice. Here is one practical exercise to train the muscle of personal boundaries. Step 1. Identify 3 recent situations that left you feeling drained, uncomfortable, or depleted. Write them down clearly, without softening the truth. Ask yourself, who was involved? Where did it happen? How did I feel in my body? Tightness, anxiety, exhaustion. And what did I do, or fail to do, that allowed this to happen? This simple act of noticing is powerful. It shines a light on where your energy leaks. It shows you the exact cracks where your boundaries have been breached. Step 2. Starting tomorrow, choose one small situation where you can practice a mini boundary. Keep it simple. Decline a phone call when you are too tired to speak. Allow yourself to let a message wait instead of answering instantly. Say, "I can't" when your body is already overloaded. These acts may seem small, almost invisible, but each one is a declaration. My well-being matters. And over time, something shifts. What begins as a whisper grows into strength. You realize that boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are gates that decide who and what is allowed into your sacred space. And you are the gatekeeper. Or simply mute the work group chat notifications when your energy is low. Notice how your body reacts in that silence. You may feel anxious at first, as if you were betraying an unspoken rule. But if you stay with that discomfort and breathe through it, something shifts. A new surge of energy begins to rise within you. It is the energy of reclaiming yourself. Step 3. Each evening, take a few minutes to write down one action you took to protect your boundaries that day. It doesn't matter if the action was big or small. What matters is the act of acknowledgement. Name it clearly. Say to yourself, "Today, I didn't let myself get pulled into empty flattery." Or simply, "Today, I didn't apologize for my emotions." This is how the invisible becomes visible. This is how inner trust grows roots. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain," and boundaries, by their very nature, often stir discomfort both in you and in others. That discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of awakening. It means you are beginning to live with greater awareness. When you dare to set boundaries, you are not being selfish. You are not closing yourself off. You are drawing a sacred circle around your inner life. A circle that says, "This is where my trust in myself is protected." Every day that you choose to honor that circle, you nurture your inner trust. Not in grand leaps, but in steady, quiet acts of self-loyalty. And over time, those acts weave together into a foundation that cannot be shaken. Number 5. The effect of a woman with self-trust. With every action you take to protect yourself, something begins to shift. A small no spoken, gently but firmly, a quiet step back from invisible depletion. A pause where once you would have rushed to please. These seem like minor acts from the outside, but inside, something sacred begins to grow. Subtle flame. A light from within that at first you may not even notice. And then, without effort, that light begins to radiate. It moves beyond the boundaries of your skin. It seeps into the air on you. It touches the gaze of those nearby. And when it does, something mysterious is set in motion. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." A woman with self-trust is exactly such a catalyst. She does not need to announce herself loudly. She does not demand attention, nor does she bend herself to be seen. She is quiet strength, steady presence, living clarity. She is like a clear stream of water, flowing without noise, colorless, odorless, and assuming, and yet she carries within her the power to cleanse an entire atmosphere. She purifies the spaces she enters. Simply by being, she disrupts manipulation without confrontation. She exposes falseness without accusation. She invites honesty by embodying it. This is the quiet alchemy of self-trust. It transforms not only the woman who carries it, but also everyone who comes into contact with her. It is the kind of strength that does not dominate, but elevates. That kind of presence that reshapes reality without force, not through preaching, not through calculated persuasion, but through a state of profound authenticity, a way of being that inspires others with nothing more than a glance, a nod, or a quiet smile. Psychology gives this a name: emotional regulation through the sympathetic nervous system. When one nervous system, stable and grounded, transmits safety to another simply by existing nearby. It is the body speaking to the body. The silent reassurance that says, "You are safe here. You can exhale." In other words, you don't need to speak. You don't need to perform. Your steadiness is felt without words. You walk into a room without needing flashy attire, without raising your voice, without the desperate effort to be noticed. And yet, people turn. They sense something in you, something they cannot name, but deeply feel. It is a magnetism that does not shout, but whispers, not the magnetism of performance, but of presence, not the shine of proving, but the glow of simply being. This is what happens when you no longer live to justify yourself, when you stop trying to prove that you are worthy, when your worth is no longer up for negotiation. You no longer bend to please. You no longer twist to be accepted. You no longer disguise yourself in order to belong. And, in that letting go, a paradox unfolds. The less you try to earn belonging, the more deeply you are received. The less you attempt to prove your light, the more undeniable it becomes. You are present as yourself, whole, authentic, and unapologetic for existing. And it is this complete acceptance of yourself that becomes a mirror. Others, standing before you, are compelled to look at themselves in new light. Your being whispers to them, "It is possible to live without disguise." You are like a resonating chamber, empty, in the truest and most sacred sense. Not void, but open, capable of making everything around you hum at its rightful frequency. When another woman steps into your orbit, especially one numbed, hardened, or silenced by the relentless noise of the world, something within her stirs. Vibration, delicate but undeniable, begins to awaken. It is not because you push your energy onto her, not because you preach, instruct, or demand, but because you do not oppress. You do not weigh down the air with judgment. You do not suffocate her with expectation. Instead, you create a space. A rare, precious space, calm enough, still enough, safe enough, For her to hear her own original sound, that sound she once believed was broken, out of tune, and worthy of being heard, or worse, wrong. And then she discovers, through your quiet presence, that it was never broken at all. It was only buried. It was only muted by the chaos of a world that never gave her silence. A woman with self-trust becomes a silent sanctuary, a living, breathing healing space, not through effort, but through being. She does not try to inspire. She does not strive to heal. She simply lives authentically. And that simple act becomes a quiet revolution, because when one woman returns to herself, she unknowingly gives permission for countless others to do the same. Her authenticity echoes, her truth multiplies, her presence alone becomes medicine. By daring to stand firm in her imperfection, she becomes unshakable. She says no when her heart contracts. She chooses herself, even when the world expects her to please. And in doing so, she sends a message more powerful than words: you can do this too. In Jung's perspective, such a woman embodies the archetype of the healer, or the guide, not because she rescues anyone, but because she has walked through the fire of her own wounds. She has stitched her soul together, thread by thread, until it became whole. Jung believed that within every person lives a constellation of archetypes, dormant, waiting, like seeds, beneath frozen ground, and when you dare to live true to yourself, something extraordinary happens. You awaken those same archetypes in others. You breathe on their embers until they remember their own fire. Your transformation does not end with you. It ripples outward, invisible, yet undeniable. The ripple effect of a woman with self-trust is not loud. It is not the glare of stage lights or the roar of applause. It is quiet, subtle, but enduring. It is like an underground stream seeping through the earth, invisible to the eye, yet unstoppable in its movement. It nourishes seeds that lie hidden in others, seeds that have long waited, afraid to sprout. Until one day, they feel the water reach them, and they rise. This is the hidden power of authenticity. Multiplies, it awakens, it heals without announcing itself. A single woman who trusts herself can shift the frequency of an entire room. A single act of self-trust can echo across generations, because when she chooses to live in alignment with her own truth, she silently whispers to the world, you, too, are allowed to exist as yourself. The respect she receives does not come from fear. It does not come from flattery. It rises from something far deeper, the quiet recognition that beside her, I am allowed to be myself, and perhaps in the end. Self-trust is not a destination. It is not a mountaintop we climb once and for all. It is a living relationship, something to nurture daily, with tenderness and intention. It is learning to stay with yourself, not only in the moments when you are radiant, shining, and strong, but also when you are chaotic, when you are conflicted, when uncertainty clouds your vision. Self-trust does not vanish in those moments. It is tested, and it grows. Like a lifelong friendship, self-trust requires patience. It is built in the smallest moments, in the breath where you choose not to abandon yourself. In the sigh you allow to be enough when nothing else seems clear, in the way you hold your own hand when no one is watching. A woman who trusts herself is not fearless. She trembles too, but she refuses to let fear lead the way. Fear may whisper, but it does not dictate. She does not seek validation from outside voices. She does not chase approval to feel real. Her very presence is her answer. Her existence, rooted in authenticity, speaks louder than words. And this is quiet power. A power that needs no stage, no spotlight, no declaration. A power that breathes only through authentic living. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be faked. It must be grown from within. And when it is, the world around her feels it, not through her performance, but through her being. If this journey has touched something within you, pause for a moment. Feel what it stirred in your heart. If it resonates, I invite you to like this video and to subscribe so we may continue walking this path together. Not merely to follow, not merely to collect content, but to remain connected, to keep this dialogue with yourself alive. Alive honestly, alive persistently, alive with deep respect for who you are becoming. Every step of this journey matters, and by staying present here, you remind yourself not to abandon your own growth. So let this be more than a click. Let it be a small act of devotion to your own unfolding.